Hello, everyone. This is Nicole, and I'd like to thank you for being here today with our special guests, Mark Taliano and Anthony J. Hall, as these gentlemen help us to connect the dots as to what is happening in this country, especially Moncton, New Brunswick, and the rest of the world. We would also like to welcome back Mr. Bruce MacDonald from Toronto, who is also a writer. So thank you, Bruce, Mark, and Tony. So now I would also like to invite you to see our website at www.i-accuse.com. And would also like to ask you this question. Who is best to decide for you, your family, and this country? If that answer is you, then it's time to take back our power by removing final decision-making authority out of all levels of governance through a true direct democracy by the people, for the people. And again, thank you for being here. And please listen to a word from our sponsor before our radio show begins. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
If you can fight, fight.
Head north if you can. Hello? Is there anyone out there hearing this?
Help each other.
Mexico City has been declared complete loss.
Be prepared for anything. Our war has just begun.
We are the hammers, and we are the nails. The world stands upon the precipice of total insanity, and we need you, and we hope you need us, bringing information, news, and as much truth as we can eke out before Mother Nature turns us to crumbs. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, working to become millions of voices singing in unison to bring the sanity back home.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Solutions Radio. This is Gail Marie, and Nicole is here with me, and we have our wonderful guests back again this week for part 2 of our discussion. Mark Taliano, contributing reporter with Huffington Post, Tony Hall, who is an author and professor, and Bruce MacDonald, who we were introduced to last week, is joining us again, and he too is an author and a technical writer. Welcome, everyone.
Oh, hi. Good afternoon.
Nice to have you all back. Thank you so much for joining us last week and for returning. So why don't we start? What we were talking about last week was fairly focused on the Moncton incident and what that meant. So looking at a deeper level to the whole situation, and we had some really good discussion. Has anybody noticed anything new over the week in relation to the Moncton type of discussion that we've had? Has anybody noticed it anywhere beyond our little chat?
I've been looking into this. Well, it's related to, I've been looking into this, and I wrote another article on it. But it relates to this issue of creating fear in the public mind and how very lucrative that can be, which we can discuss later. I don't know if there's any updates on the specifics of the tragedy, though.
Okay. What about you, Tony? Have you heard anything?
Well, I think our little talk last week is the main center of discussion so far on this issue. It seems to me like it's just been, the door's been shut and people want to move on, and it's almost like it didn't happen. I ask myself, what's happening to Justin Bork? Where is he incarcerated? Is he being treated by doctors? Is he being investigated for, mental issues, mental instability issues? Is he being medicated? Is he being lobotomized? I think it's very important that we continue to ask questions about what's going on with this matter.
Definitely.
So has the corporate media more or less dropped this story for now?
Well, the corporate media looks to me like they've dropped the story. So I think our discussion could broaden a bit into the way these type of episodes are being exploited to build up the police state, to build up the military apparatus, to reckon Canadians that we give up more and more of our civil liberties and what we consider our basic rights, to empower police to do surveillance, to supposedly protect us against this type of incident in the future. So what do you have you noticed anything, Bruce? Or?
No, I think that it's gone quiet in terms of mainstream media. I refrain from saying corporate media, although it is, but there's there's still some really good reporters out there, and I respect them. So I don't do that. But it's gone quiet. Where we left off last week was a couple of things. Number
what
one,
reporters do you respect on this story? Like why? That's interesting. You respect reporters. I find it difficult to respect reporters, who are paid to do this job these days and don't seem to ask the appropriate questions. Can you talk about your respect for?
Okay, you twisted my arm there a little bit and caught me being too nice. Yeah, I have a lot of a lot of disdain for it too. I mean, to me, a reporter is someone like John Pilger. I mean, going back to his work on the IMF in the 90s in Indonesia, if you want to understand, and he's one of the easiest segues into a reasonable and intelligent parlance about politics and economics today for people outside the alternative, non-mainstream approach to what's happening in the news. So John Pilger would be one. Matt Tabibi in Rolling Stone, I think, is doing some really good work. Jeremy Scahill, who did the documentary Dirty Wars and writes for, I believe, the American Standard, is another one I respect. In Canada, geez, I don't know. I used to like Macon on the Globe. I really liked Red Rum the Innocent, and he kind of got the whole wrongful conviction movement started. ADWIC formed as a result of the Guy Paul Morin case. But I see our media here in Canada as more tied up, more in a straitjacket even than in the U.S. The U.S. has always played the U.S. has always played the same game as us. They just leave both jokers in the deck, so they can. We take the jokers out of the deck, so you never get the wild card on mainstream media, which you can still get in the U.S. So that's
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What I see now is that the game has changed. The corporate media scene is totally different now. Over the past couple of years, especially, not only the monopoly ownership, but now with the NDAA legislation, it means a government policy can just throw out literally and very legally, throw out all sorts of propaganda and nonsense and falsehoods on all sorts of corporate messaging, social media, totally within the underneath the umbrella of the law, totally legal. So the game has totally changed, and that is why. That is one of the important reasons why this whole issue has come up, because we can't trust what the corporate media is telling us anymore. In issues such as this, that, for example, heighten fear or rationalize boots on the ground. And although that applies to the states, there's a whole lot of interface between Homeland Security legislation in Canada. Naomi Wolf's site, she drew it up. And there's a whole lot of integration now between, even more so now with Harper than there was in the past, between police on both sides of the border. So this question now, I mean, some people, I don't know what they're thinking, but I think it's really important that we ask these questions now, because the game has changed legally. It's a different corporate media now, based upon that change.
Yeah, Bruce, you mentioned Scahill, who writes for The Nation often in the United States. You mentioned John Pilger, who's an Australian, who worked for many mainstream mainstream media venues and doing documentary films based out of London. And who's the third one you mentioned?
Matt Taibbi. He writes for Rolling Stone and NBC.
Taibbi. And Taibbi wrote
I'm
a book
sorry. Yeah,
to
it's a Lebanese
Taibbi wrote a book to say, the people who question the orthodox truth of what happened on 9/11 are, it was a book to say it was really insulting to the so-called truthers. Scahill avoids that subject of 9/11, and Pilger sort of creeps up to the edge of it. But it seems to me that all three of those individuals have a certain entree. They are, in a way, mainstream media people, and the condition to be that is you not talk about 9/11. You not go into you can talk about all the bad things that flow out of 9/11, but you better not go into identifying, what is the content of 9/11. It's contested. So I don't know, Bruce, are you with them on that, or do you avoid the 9/11 subject? You mentioned, you publish in mainstream venues. How do you deal with that issue and the involvement of those three, or the lack of involvement of those three particular reporters in covering that story?
Well, the thing that all three of them have in common, and the kind of news that I find the best that you're going to get in the mainstream, and the only place that you're allowed to go a little deeper. I agree with you completely. There are certain things that editorial meetings clearly are set off bounds, and 9/11 would be one of them. But the economics is where you can get fairly close to the truth. Now Pilger has been mainly an economics journalist for most of his career, focusing on the IMF. And the work he did on the IMF loan to the Suharto family in Indonesia is like a textbook case example of how the IMF operates. And then you can map it out to every country they've gone to, Brazil, everywhere. Taibbi did a really good work on the 2008 Wall Street collapse and the Libor scandal, and really made people aware of the fact that this was nothing more than, I think he went so far as to say the Secret Service should be investigating it because it borders on counterfeiting. And what's the difference between counterfeiting a fiat note from the U.S. Federal Reserve and a bond or what have you? And so that's what I like about them. If you're trying to get me to consent to the notion that there are restricted areas in the mainstream, no matter how tenacious the journalist, where if they do cross that line, it'll never get published, and if they do it twice, they'll get fired. Yeah, you have my total agreement. They've been co-opted, they've been bought out, but the reason I don't like to go to that attitude so quickly is that it sort of cements the idea that we're never going to get these guys turned around and working for us. And I think, call me optimistic. Despite everything that's going on in the world right now and in Canada, I think that there's a turnaround coming in the next 10 years. And it's a question of how far can these people go before it cannot be ignored by anybody, and before it becomes a question of survival that preempts your job security, your pension, and all of the things that really get you locked into your position and ultimately your silence if you're a media person. So that's where I'd finish up with that. And Scahill, I mean, if you have a chance, take a look at Dirty Wars. It really explains what the Special Forces was doing there, and a special division of the Department of Defense. I forget what it's called, Joint something. But basically a kill squad.
This was in Iraq?
Yeah, they were in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yeah. And he single-handedly pretty much forced the DOD to come out and admit that it existed. But I think it's called JSOC. And basically JSOC, if you want to Google that. But they basically came out and said, yes, we exist, but this is what we do, and never addressing Taibbi Scahill, but really the underlying reason for the disclosure was that his work had gotten out there. So I mean, they're doing the best they can, and I'm sure that a lot of them are aware of it. Who on the call works with the Huffington Post. I mean, what's it like working with the editorial board at the Huffington Post Canada?
That would be Mark.
Yep. Oh, well, I'm just on a blog there. I submit my work to all sorts of sites, and that's one of them. And I mean, the article that I wrote, dealing with Moncton, a lot of sources did not take it. Huffington Post did, but I didn't jump to any conclusions. I mean, I didn't. So that would explain that. But yeah, I think a lot. I mean, my most recent article, I'm using information from Jeremy Skahall. I think he's done a great job. I like Pilger as well and Taibbi, but I think what we're getting to here is that there are still topics that aren't being addressed, and really super transformative topics that are not being addressed for the reasons that you guys have pointed out. I mean, Hedges had to leave his job at the New York Times, or he quit because he opposed the Iraq War and made no secret of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of these people have a lot on the line. They have to pay a mortgage and so on.
Yeah, no, I should have added Michael
Well,
Hedges to the list
the financial,
well,
yeah. and to put 9/11 in a different category than the banking stories. 9/11 has had huge implications for the way Wall Street operated. It's a classic case if you want to divert attention from, say, the deregulation, the massive deregulation of Wall Street and the deceptive forms of derivatives that just created havoc in the financial system. So many investigators, financial investigators, were taken off of that beat and put on the terrorism beat after 9/11. Taibbi goes into Goldman Sachs, but to me, the real nub of the financial debacle, you go into AIG. The financial, it starts as an insurance company. It comes out of Stark's work in the founder in Singapore and in Asia, and he's very prominent in the Second World War with Donovan, the founder of what became the CIA. AIG gets involved in the operations of the secret state, and these derivatives don't only apply to mortgages. There's a category of derivatives that apply to mortgages, but derivatives can apply to anything, and there's obviously an area of derivatives betting and speculating, the type of activity resulted in the financial debacle of 2008 that has to do with bets and derivative deals based on the national security state, pipelines in Eurasia, drug deals in Eurasia. AIG had a whole fleet of planes. I mean, the legacy of the opium wars in the British Empire, go on. Illicit drugs continue to be a big part of imperial politics. The kind of machinations that are all involved in 9/11 are very much part of the larger system, where there's this unbelievable level of criminal activity in the banking sector, and we can't put barriers on to certain lines of investigation. We've got to look at the whole thing.
And you would agree then that the main media is still sort of, you would agree then that the mainstream media still is sort of holding their socks up in that one regard, is the economic reporting.
Oh yeah, and this is obviously money and the generation of money and how we deal with the apportionment of credit and the apportionment of debt. This is the main determining factor on how we're organized as human beings across the planet. And of course, a big part of the economy is is militarism, is a huge investment in the machinery of warfare and destruction. And in order to build that part of the economy up, you have to fuck with people's brains sufficiently to justify, the demonization of huge categories of people so that they can be bombed.
And that ties in with Moncton. A lot of us are afraid of is that will be the tragedy will be used to beef. I'm concerned that it will be used to privatize more of the security industry and therefore create new markets that are counterproductive markets and create a lot of money for certain companies. For example, Blackwater Academy. I can see that happening because already Harper's looking at privatization of prisons. And if that does happen, we are inheriting a lot of the problems that the states have, and those problems we have possibly already migrated to this country. And that's an open question as it ties into Moncton.
I'm wondering if there might not be some benefit for the listener in maybe giving a brief description of what a derivative is, what their history in our financial markets is, how they began and how they reached this point they're at now, and more specifically, who they benefit. Do they benefit the general public, or is this an industry that the financial world just created for itself to make money independent of the savings and contributions of personal investors and just kind of go and do their own thing? I don't know who might be best to speak on that.
If you have a look at the last chapter of Earth into Property, as I was writing that book and the financial debacle happened, and so I was sort of looking at a climax to the plot. Capitalism falls down. I'm writing a history of capitalism. So I said I got to try to get a handle on this situation as it's developing. So I kept running across this word derivative, and a derivative it's sort of like money. It's sort of like something with a value, like a block of gold or a house that you own or a kilo of potatoes, but it's actually derived from something with real value. So I guess the early days of derivatives, well, let's bet on the future price of pork bellies, or let's bet on what the price of gold is going to be a year hence, 5 years hence, or whatever. It actually happened under Clinton. All the regulations that prevented this type of speculation were removed. You and I can pass. If I may, you and I can pass back and forth an ounce of gold and buy it and sell it. But you could have 1 million people betting on who's going to benefit from your and my transaction with an ounce of gold, and that vast array of betting, you might call that a derivative.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
Let me just hit the nail right on the head there for you. You set it up for me perfectly. It's really Clinton who brought most of this in. So, folks, this is what you got to understand. The modern derivatives market is basically what they threw Michael Milken in jail for in the 80s. They called it junk bonds. And once they had him in jail and they studied how the market responded to him, they stepped back and they said, hey, this guy's onto something. And they legalized it all. And what a derivative is it is derived from a primary trade. A primary trade is where you're the purchaser, you go directly to the seller or the seller's broker, and you say, I want to buy X number of whatever. And a derivative is where you bring time into it. You bring future into it. So bring Star Trek and all the time travel and complications of that into it. So basically you bring timeline complications into simple financial transactions. And you say, well, okay, I'm going to bet that this is going to be worth so much in a year. And then you can hedge too. And so think of it, it's literally a casino. literally a casino. You know, I'm gonna split my aces, and I'm gonna double my bet, and it's just it benefits
and then you get
nobody but them.
AIG. You get and then you get the insurance industry saying, well, we'll sell you insurance. So if you get involved in these derivative bets, you can't lose because we'll insure you for that eventuality. And of course, the system freezes up and everybody loses in their derivative bets, and the system is freezing up. And they all go to AIG and say, now, you know, we have this insurance policy, give us our money. AIG doesn't have the billions and billions, the hundreds of billions, trillions to pay out the counterparty. And it's at this point that the Federal Reserve runs in and then just creates these trillions of dollars to bail out these very excessive speculators who were really pushing the frontiers of, you know, what is value, what is money, what is you know, the rules and regulations that were taken apart, done away with. Now, AIG, you know, was Maurice Greenberg, who was one of the potential heads of the CIA. I mean, it was well known that AIG's base in Hong Kong, which, you know, AIG is kind of ground zero of this derivative betting and the design of this derivative betting. So AIG has you know, its headquarters in Hong Kong was well known as the CIA headquarters. They're, you know, they have all these fleets of planes that seem to be involved in, you know, illicit drugs, which is a very important part of the overall financial system. And, you know, AIG kind of seemed to take over the business from the Bank of Commerce and Credit International, the BCCI, the Pakistani-based bank, which was funding operations like probably what happened on 9/11, which was, you know, the CIA, that was its bank, and they were, and as we were saying, like people like Justin Bork or, you know, people who are known to have hostility and do things, these become assets. These people are funded. These people are helped because they create the mental environment, especially after the end of the Cold War, which is required to, you know, keep building up our military apparatus, our police apparatus. So this distinction, well, he you know, Taibbi goes into the financial issues, which he does quite well, but you know, he demeans and humiliates and presents as clowns people who are investigating 9/11 or investigating maybe AIG's possible involvement in these matters. That's serious. That is, you know, there's a litmus test there, and I mean, you know, I can't help but viewing it like, well, I'm doing a good job. Sure, I didn't say anything about the Germans taking off the Jews in train cars to Auschwitz and other places. I knew it wouldn't be good for my career to talk about that, but I did talk about other things. No, I mean, it's so central in how the whole worldview is constructed of, you know, our financial system, our police system, our military system, our government system, that to just put a cover over this one aspect of it is a serious matter and shouldn't be treated.
Can I just ask, before we go on, just going back to the derivatives, and as a layperson, and not fully understanding what they are, is it possible to manipulate, because it's futures? Is it possible that
that's just one type of derivative, but these can be on any subject. You and I can sit down together in secret, you know, and say we represented an interest with big money behind us, and say, you know, we're going to build this pipeline. We're going to knock off this particular leader in Uzbekistan or something. We're going to put in place this person. We're going to get the drug money from this deal. We're going to apply it to this selling of nuclear secrets or any combination of we can think about and saying if this happens and this happens and this happens, you owe me, and if this happens and this happens.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
You.
And it's very
opaque.
Echo. Yeah, I'm getting a huge echo here.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if Gail Marie about that.
Okay, we kind of got off here. Okay, Mark, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, yeah, I'm very interested in this, but when Tony is talking, I'm hearing a lot of echo. Is it just me, or are other people hearing echo?
I'm not hearing it.
Yeah, I'm hearing it from you now too. Okay.
Okay, maybe.
Okay, well, go ahead. That's okay. I'll try to make adjustments here.
Okay. Now, before we go back to Tony, Bruce, did you have something that you wanted to say in relation to what Tony was talking about?
Yeah, the derivatives. He gave a really good example. If this and this and this and this, and very much if you listen to that, it's basically the conditional hierarchy of a program. And very much what we call derivatives is the bringing in of complex mathematical algorithms into the financial world. So it's no accident that it begins with Clinton. This is when they begin to get the super servers in there, the Sun Microsystem servers, and all of these things, and they start hiring pure mathematicians. You go to any major bank, and I have friends working at the very highest echelons of TD and several other banks, and I'm telling you, you go in there now and it's computer coders and mathematicians, and they create these algorithms. And a computer program is nothing but a series of if, else, if. If this, if not, if else, then do this. And so it's a bunch of, if the condition is met, move forward, if not, step back. And this is the mentality being brought to the financial markets right now. Now, nobody in this call has ever bought a derivative, I'm sure. Am I correct? I mean,
no, I have. No.
You haven't?
No, I have not. No.
Yeah,
Nope.
They're generally inaccessible to us. They're an instrument that's used simply in the financial world itself. Now, if you become an equity holder of some merit, if you're controlling $500 million or $1 billion of middle class Canadians' money in a mutual fund somewhere, you may then segue into this market under the guidance of someone else. But it's as esoteric as the financial world gets. We should have left it where it was with Michael Milken and left it illegal. It should not be legal. It confuses everything, and it's if you look at the amount of money on the books represented in derivatives trades, it's in excess of the total volume of money in savings for North America. And so, how does this work? How can there be more money in this market than actually exists? It's a metafiction, is what it is.
It's crazy.
And then the irony is when the system freezes up, when all of this new theory, dreamt up by very abstract thinkers is applied to the real world of economics, the system totally freezes up, and nobody has enough confidence in anybody else to make a transaction, to lend money, so then essentially with a knife to our throat, we're informed that unless governments suddenly make trillions of new money available to the people who caused this financial transaction, that this financial debacle, that next week we're all going to be out on the streets, that there's going to be no paychecks, that nobody's going to be able to go to the grocery store anymore, but the world is going to break down, and the depression of the 1930s would be small in comparison. So on that basis, then the governments go about mortgaging the future of their citizens and hand over free capital to the people who caused this financial debacle. And that's got to be the biggest transfer of wealth, in the history of economics, in the history of civilization, from the lower class, the middle class, to the very rich. And the very rich, by accepting this money, in a sense, are saying, well, we're socialists now. We depend on the
They're not saying it.
Wealth of the taxpayer, but they're not saying it. But so then when after that we take the bailout money and we essentially show ourselves that we're socialists at the high level, but we still get this rhetoric about privatization and the need for austerity, and so you start to get people in Greece and elsewhere demonstrating and saying this austerity that we're now told we don't have money for health care, for schools and whatnot, but we have trillions to pay bailouts to the people who caused the financial debacle. But of course it requires some analysis. And we start with this premise. Well, 9/11. Okay, Taibbi, he won't talk about that, but he'll talk about Wall Street and what goes on Wall Street. Well, it seems to me the Twin Towers were on Wall Street, and it seems to me that whatever happened on 9/11 had a great deal to do with Wall Street. And this idea that we can parcel up these little topics and talk about the outcomes of 9/11 and identify how bad those outcomes have been for all of human beings, but not go into what actually is the content, the core of 9/11. This demonization of Arab fundamentalists, Muslim fundamentalists. I mean, now we have this phenomena of these so-called terrorists, Sunni terrorists, invading Iraq, ISIS or ISIL. Like, who are they? Where are they getting their financing from? Whose interests are they serving? So this constant depiction as if they're sort of independent Muslim fundamentalists who just act independently, that somehow just find the weapons, find the flight training, find the organization, and just operate out of some independent urge of hostility towards something called the West. This is a fiction, and this is part of the whole smoke and mirrors and deception that it was part of the prelude to and the outcome of the financial debacle of 2008, 2009.
Can I say one thing?
Sure, Mark.
Are you there?
Yep, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I think I know what Tony is saying, and what I'm getting from this is that we need to address these issues instead of sweeping them under the carpet, because if we do not address them, in the corporate media included, it will happen again and again and again. Already Dick Cheney is talking about some huge terrorist attack that's going to happen in the States. I mean, he should be in jail right now. He's a credibly accused war criminal. Why is the corporate media bringing him out to talk about Iraq? It's actually insane. And what Tony says is I agree totally. I mean, you have to connect all of these dots. And again, if we don't, and if we don't address the ugly side of things, then we are going to see these over and over again. And I think it's happening right now in Ukraine. And it may be migrating to Canada as well.
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand that last part. What do you mean? What do you mean we're going to bring it into Canada? What do you mean?
Oh, sorry, because okay. So we need to address these issues. Blackwater Academy, for example, continues to make a fortune. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Absolutely, yeah. Very well.
Oh, okay, because I'm not hearing you guys well, but I am. Okay, so Blackwater Academy continues to make a fortune in Iraq. And according to German sources, in May they had like 400 mercenaries, U.S. mercenaries in Ukraine. So they're making all sorts of money. A lot of us don't know about it. I mean, we had 911, and there are a lot of very reasonable questions about that have not been answered satisfactorily. And possibly with the porous border now between the Canada and the U.S., possibly we may be looking at some of these episodes that trigger fear, which trigger the very lucrative privatization of security and surveillance and militarization. We could be experiencing these same covert operations in Canada. It could be migrating to Canada. We don't know. But this is why it's important, for example, to address this issue of 9/11, for example. And who's talking about it? I mean, Hedges won't talk about it. Pilger has said maybe it was enabled. Scahill, I don't know if he talked about it. But I think it's really important to talk about so that these issues don't grow like a cancer, which appears to be what's happening.
Yeah. And
Well,
why do you think, Bruce?
oh, hold on. Okay, Bruce, I think you were first.
Well, yeah, I mean, to address the idea of an operation like this in Canada, I don't think it's going to happen, and I'll tell you why. The goal of such an operation is to instill fear in people. Canadians live in a constant state of fear. There's a very quiet fear in this country, you know, and I don't know why that is, but it's omnipresent. It's everywhere. So, you know, we don't need it. Whereas the U.S., they're more, you know, get out in their front yard and hold their rifles over their head. So they're really having it fully applied to them right now. Our government just does whatever it wants because there isn't the level of scrutiny on it that there is in the U.S. On the U.S. government. I mean, you've got a full rift in the U.S. now. I mean, there's a rift everywhere. Rift in the DOD, rift in the CIA, rift in the NSA. There's no unified body there now. It's like the makings of a civil war. Whereas it's complete hegemony in Canada. With the only thing we have that is quite unique in the world is we probably have the largest, most vocal and politically effective Native community in the world. And I'm very proud of that, actually. I mean, you look at what's going on in the Amazon rainforest, you look at the decimation of Native culture in the United States, you know, so really that's and you could make the case that occasionally one of these operations does take place. I mean, I'd certainly suggest, you know, the shooting of Dudley George. But I that's my take on it. I don't think we're going to see them the way they do in the U.S. These terror false flags.
There is a lot. I'll let that. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say there's a lot of money to be made.
Okay. Hold on, Mark. Okay, Tony, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate Bruce's nod to the importance of Indigenous voices of dissent in Canada. Of course, you know, we had the patriation of the Canadian Constitution, and you know, I was very involved in those politics, and you know, that's been sort of the basis of my study of colonization and efforts of decolonization, starting with the Indian country of Canada. But from that base, then, I would say no. I mean, 9/11 is thoroughly reflected in the way Canadian society is organized. Essentially, Stephen Harper came to power as a sort of clone of George Bush in the atmosphere of the post-9/11 era. You know, in 2003, there was John Chrétien with the majority. The Liberals had a majority. Stephen Harper gets up and accuses Chrétien of being some kind of barbarian, not supporting the United States in invading Iraq. He writes an editorial in the New York Times about the shame of Canada for not joining the United States in invading Iraq. And of course, this invasion of Iraq very much flowed out of the atmosphere, the psychological atmosphere after 9/11. So from being on the edges of government in 2003. By 2011, he has the majority in Parliament. And to me, this shows all the marks of regime change, the type of regime change that took place regularly in Central America. U.S. Instigated covert regime change. So when we learned about the election fraud of 2011 and how much the tactics of election fraud and voter repression were like the Republican Party in the United States, that's one aspect of a foreign imposed regime change that has completely transformed the political landscape of Canada and is making Canada sort of unrecognizable to those of us who identified with the kind of social democracy that we used to have in this country. Those of us who just can't resolve ourselves to transforming Canada into a kind of petro-state. Wherever you have a petro-state, you have a petro-tyranny. Democracy kind of gets overturned because those who control the money from the vast flows of money in this big oil regime, tend to dominate one way or another. So the idea that somehow we're insulated from the kind of things that have happened in the United States, that's just not true, Bruce.
I think it may be. Sorry, I was just going to say it may be true as long as we continue to comply. As soon as we start saying no, mm-hmm. then things may change a little bit.
I was to clarify, I was referring specifically to violent false flags like the Boston bombing, like 9/11 and things like that. We have a few things that don't amount to anything, like the two fellows they pulled off of Via Rail with allegedly the rudiments of a bomb. But no, we're not. We've been untouched since 9/11. I mean, we haven't had any terrorist acts on our soil. That's specifically what I was referring to. As for your thesis on regime change and U.S. complicity in that, I find that tenuous at best. I just think that you're giving the U.S. too much credit. I think that we're really a kind of satellite of London, more so than Washington. Voter fraud.
It's on record that it did happen in the mid-1960s. Okay, is it all right to continue?
What happened?
Am I cutting in too severely there?
Yeah.
Well, in the mid-1960s, John Diefenbaker. I mean, there's books about this. There's a book, Lament for a Nation, by George Grant, a famous Canadian philosopher. But essentially, Diefenbaker was not playing ball with the United States government when it came to bringing in nuclear weapons into Canada. And it's a matter of record that John F. Kennedy got together with his chief pollster, who was also a CIA figure. Often pollsters and intelligence community kind of are close. And they agreed that they were going to get rid of Diefenbaker. And so Canadian journalists were called in, they were paid, and it's a matter of record that John Diefenbaker, who was replaced by Lester Pearson, was dispensed with at the behest of the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. So we've seen a recorded case of regime change in Canada in the mid-1960s. And, from going from a marginal party in 2003 and then unifying with the Progressive Conservatives and going from there, the political wilderness to majority in the Canadian House of Commons by 2011, that's got to be one of the most speedy reconfigurations of political landscape that you can imagine. And the idea that it just all happened through, logical debate and, free and open debate where the merits of different arguments were all given their. Go ahead.
appreciate your thesis. I still find it tenuous at best. I don't suggest for a moment that what happened with Kennedy and his pollster did not happen. It may very well have happened, but its efficacy for turning an election, that forces outside of Canada are brought to bear on elections, is, I don't think, can be disputed. Their efficacy and their ability to transform a regime, it is up for debate. And if you go back to 2003, I mean, the Liberals pretty much hung themselves. They were scandal-ridden. There was infighting. That was the beginning of the big Game of Thrones between Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien. I mean, they made a laughing stock out of themselves. So it's not a huge surprise to me that the Conservatives came in. I will give you this. It is alarming to me the degree to which Stephen Harper fits the profile of the Washington-based neocon, like an order of magnitude greater than Obama. He is. I mean, we seem to be APAC central now, without any of the money spreading around that they spread around in Washington. You know, we're Israel's friendliest ally in the United Nations now. And it's when I see Baird and Harper doing things like this, like that idiot Baird, you know, showing up in the National Post the day after the SodaStream scandal with what's that famous actress's name, Scarlett Johansson. There he is the next day in the National Post. He had a SodaStream machine, you know, FedEx to him overnight from the Gaza Strip, and gets a picture of it. I mean, talk about painting a bullseye on yourself. It's almost like they want a terrorist act in Canada. I'll give you that. But, you know, let's never forget that these guys are nuts, okay? You know, we all have some form of spiritual dimension to our lives, or not, perhaps, but these guys are dyed-in-the-wool Christian fundamentalists. They're coming out of that sort of U.S. Christian revivalism that is, you know, retarded second cousin to snake handling. And don't think for a moment this doesn't factor into their thinking. It does huge time. Huge. I mean, you go back to Preston Manning and Stockwell Day. I mean, these guys are ministers. And then you have this Stevie Harper, who is the guy they finally got to bring Ontario and Quebec in because, he's an economist. But he's still nuts. He's still completely nuts. I mean, these guys are trying to bring on. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay,
sorry, Bruce. I agree.
Sorry, Mark, just hold on one second. We've got about 4 minutes until the break.
Okay.
So I'll give you a minute to have a last word. We'll give Tony a minute, and then we'll have a break. Okay, go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, Bruce, I agree. I mean, the Christian fundamentalist is a real driver. Well, it appears to be a real driver in the political scene right now in Canada, and I think that's part of what Tony's getting at. The population didn't really elect conservative, like not red Tory. What we have is more Republican governance, which is, to my way of thinking, fairly alien to Canada. I mean, the Liberals may have hung themselves and invited the Conservatives in, but the Conservatives in Canada now, to my mind, aren't really Indigenous Conservatives at all. That's it.
Well, maybe after the break we can have a really, really good, intelligent, and in-depth conversation on what's really going wrong. And I'll preface it by saying this. There's no such thing as a leader anymore. We get managers. You know, so when you look at Stephen Harper, you're looking at the franchise manager for Canada, and that franchise is plugged into an international monetary system which affects most of our policy, except for cosmetic legislation like, sexual orientation and women's rights and Native, all of these sorts of things which are tangential to the money engine. But the money engine is the real core of it. And what we've got now is a system where everybody's hands are tied. You know, so the problem people are making, in my estimation, is that they're accepting the system and the limitations of it at its face value, whereas we should be demanding leaders.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hi. I don't know what happened there. Oh, we lost.
Okay. It wasn't just me then.
We lost Bruce. So, Tony, any last words before the break? And I will try to get Bruce back.
Well, I moved here in 1990 to the Calgary area, and I've watched, Harper and, come to power. So I'd like to comment after the break on the perspective from this angle.
Okay. Nicole's been trying to talk, so we're going to have her speak first after the break, and then we'll get into this discussion again. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Nicole. Please visit our site at i-accuse1c.com. Thank you so much.
Hello, and welcome back to Solutions Network with Gail Marie and Nicole. Just before we get back into conversation, I just wanted to do a little bit of business and let everybody know that the Freedom Slip Summer Auction Round 2 is starting. You can find out more information about that at www.ourfreedomnetwork.com. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Nicole, I think, has been having some technical difficulties trying to join into the conversation. So I'm going to call on Nicole now to see if we can hear her. Speak, Nicole.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me now?
You're not very loud.
Hi, Nicole. No.
Yeah, we can't hear you very well.
No.
How's this?
Oh, better.
Go into the sounds. That's better. Yeah.
Just do more, a little more of what you did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, actually, after listening to all of you for the last hour, I've had a few comments to make or things to add. But the first comment I really would like to make is to answer Bruce's statement that we need leaders. Well, personally, I think that the leaders need to become 35 million Canadians, and that includes the nations. And as long as we keep this system, which is the political party system, it's always we're never going to get out of this mess. And if we want to get out of this mess, we're going to have to lift up our boots, demand direct democracy, and the end of political party elections and the Crown in Canada. And redo our Constitution, because in 1982, Trudeau did say that we have the right to amend our Constitution. And right now, we have, between the ages of 18 and 34, we have approximately 14 million people, young people, who have never participated in a constitutional question. And I think that needs to be brought back up to the surface. Otherwise, we're never going to get out of this. And so that's the first thing I wanted to mention. And second of all was a comment that Mark had made in regards to ISIS. And when I was doing the video last night, I was able to go through the one that Adrian Arsenault had covered in regards to ISIS. And when I looked at that video, and I thought, wow, this is a movie production. I can't see Muslims filming themselves and having themselves as caricature, like all dark with a beautiful background and walking away, like into the sunset type thing. So when you look at that news reporting that she did on that, I'm just wondering, who made the video? And where does it come from? Because the quality of it is just outstanding. And if I could videotape like that, I'd be a movie maker. So those were the only two main things that I wanted to add in there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Nicole. Did anybody want to respond to Nicole?
Yes. Well, I didn't see that footage, Nicole, but this is basically what Naomi Wolf is saying. We cannot trust imaging anymore. We can't trust media imaging anymore the way we used to be able to have more confidence in it. We just don't know what the sources are. And I mean, are those ISIS soldiers Blackwater Academy? We don't know, and we need to ask those questions. Not that we'll necessarily get an answer, but I think we're living in a new age now where we cannot trust a lot of these images. Were the Facebook entries of Justin Bork original? Were they his, or were they manufactured? We don't know. That's why the game has changed, basically, unfortunately.
Well, the only way we're ever going to know anything is if we remove.
Oh, hold on, Tony. Go ahead, Nicole.
No, you
yeah,
go
what
ahead.
I was going. Yeah, what I was going to say is that, you know, we're never going to know until we remove final decision-making authority out of all levels of government, and it needs to happen fast enough, and that can happen with just one declaration that everybody can sign. With 14 million kids who have never participated in a constitutional debate, we wouldn't have very much of a hard time. I think at least 16 million to overturn everything. Because when I went to Ottawa on May 10th, we were getting people to sign a letter stating that fact. And even seniors, the French seniors, loved the idea. And they loved the idea of a 50% governance with the nations. So everything that we're trying to do, you know, is to make sure that nothing happens to us the way it has in the past. We can control our own money. We have the right in Canada to produce our own money and to make sure that nobody is homeless ever again or is without money. Anybody who disagrees with that only wants to play at the international level and, you know, doesn't really care what happens at the lower levels. And those are capitalists. And, you know, there are many, many solutions out there. We just need to sit down and think about it. And if we all focused on only the one question that I have in that video, Mark, the video that I made of our last show, you'll see that video that I'm talking about in regards to Adrian and ISIS. And and as well as, you know, if we all focused on one question, who is best to decide for you, to make decisions for you and your family and this country, other than yourself? Like right now, we're allowing MPs and all these politicians to rule over us. We give away our power to them every time we elect them. The party system is corrupt, and unless you if you don't toe the party line and listen to your constituents, you are fired. And you know, we've seen that with the NDP. They fired 2 out of Thunder Bay, and because they listened to their constituents, and when they did that, they were fired. So the whole thing of, you know, Justin Trudeau is not going to be any better than anybody else. All puppets on a string. The corporations are the ones who rule this. And I've done enough research in the last 6 years to last me a lifetime in regards to who makes the suggestions to the court. The corporations are the ones that hire all of the scholars and everybody to bring up scenarios, and then they feed that to the government and then make their recommendations. And we saw that with the SPP. So, you know, we need to, if everybody focus on the one question, who's best to decide for you, your family, and this country, we wouldn't have a hard time getting this country changed in no time flat, where we're in control.
Yeah, I completely agree, Nicole. I think at the heart of it is the Bank of Canada and control. Look, we need to go back into the history of our economics in the last 100 years. If you go back and you read your John Kenneth Galbraith and your John Maynard Keynes, these social safety nets were not supposed to be run by countries that didn't have absolute control over their central banking. So the moment, isn't it a coincidence now that we've internationalized the banking and set it up against international standards, all of a sudden you have all these austerity measures coming in. You have bail-in provisions being written into the 2013 Canadian budget. And when Moron on his way to London over there, Mark Carney is asked about it in a preference in a press conference, you get the most stuttered response you've ever heard. He goes, there's actually audio of that online. Listen to him go on. You've never seen anything like this. It's just, well, it's there, worst case scenario. We don't ever expect to use it. When is the last time the government ever put legislation through Parliament and gave it royal assent if they didn't expect to use it at some point? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So
the Bank of Canada.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Nicole. The problem rests with the international organization that has come about since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the sort of bipolar world. And the face of the capitalism that has won would not have, that has emerged, had it been present when we were in the midst of the Cold War, I don't think too many people would have wanted this version of capitalism to survive. That's my 2 cents worth.
I'd just like to throw out there too.
So we
Sorry, just 1 sec.
Sure, Gail.
We are the shareholders of the Bank of Canada, the people of Canada, and I don't think people recognize that. And I think that's something that's really
we're very
important.
Lucky.
Go ahead, Tony.
We're very lucky in Canada that we do have the Bank of Canada, which has sort of given over its powers to the private banks, but it could issue, like it did before 1971, debt-free money rather than this strange fiat currency system that is, inflating the money supply and setting us up for the next round of disaster. I must say, I do find myself thinking I don't want to see us discouraging young people from learning about, the parliamentary system, from learning about the parties, from doing the best we can with, the imperfect system we've got. And, if the 50% of people who didn't vote would vote, things could be changed a lot through, the existing system, through the parliamentary system. Having said that, Occupy movement, I think there was this sense that, the system as it's now structured is so fixed, and the lobbyists, the corporate lobbyists and the bankers have so much power over the system that the system is sort of fundamentally flawed, and that we have to get together in our town squares and come up with alternatives, ways to conduct our society and make our decisions that just sort of go around the parliamentary system as such. I could see a kind of parallel strategy where we don't want to lead young people to away from the polls altogether and complete contempt for the existing system, but there are such huge problems in the takeover of this existing system by forces that are not democratic and don't have the public interest at heart at all. Quite the contrary. In the first half, this emphasis that Bruce put on ad scam and while the Liberals just got voted out because they were incompetent and they were corrupt in ad scam. When I compare that, for instance, to the news that was coming out, and we were starting to get investigations in Parliament into the torture of innocent civilians and others in Afghanistan by Canadian armed forces, that Canadian armed forces, it was beginning to come out, may well have broken and violated, international laws against torture, and that the government itself at the highest levels may have directed this or be implicated in it. Remember, we were just getting revelations, and then suddenly Parliament was prorogued, and somehow it doesn't seem to matter what the subject is. Somehow it just never comes to fruition. We never got any kind of investigation, meaningful, deep investigation into what really happened in 2011. I see no reason to assume that the Conservative Party of Canada won the 2011 election. It's certainly clear that George W. Bush did not win the 2000 election, nor did he win the 2004 election. But the Republican Party have a comparative advantage at cheating. And, the indigenous conservatives of the progressive conservatives of Joe Clark and David Crombie and John A. MacDonald, for that matter, that party was annihilated in order to bring in a clone of the Republican Party of the United States, or maybe we could call it a branch plant of the Republican Party of the United States. Here in, we're 120 miles away from Calgary, so I'm not right in Calgary. But the founding of the government of Canada that we now have, which is not a conservative, it's not rooted in, the Conservative Party or Indigenous conservatism. It's rooted in a Christian fundamentalist movement here in Alberta, the basis of the Reform Party, the social credit movement. This province used to be governed out of a Sunday afternoon Bible show by Bible Bill Aberhart, the founder of the social credit movement. And that's the roots of this present national government in Canada. Now, Stephen Harper is got a graduate degree at the University of Calgary in economics. And there he was a big part of, the most famous student of the Calgary School, the so-called Calgary School, centered in the political science department. Now, the founder of the political science department in 1968 came straight from the U.S. Pentagon. He was an expert in sort of covert politics having to do with oil in Iran. And his first hire was Tom Flanagan, Professor Tom Flanagan. And Tom Flanagan became the mentor, the teacher, and later the political advisor of Stephen Harper. And Tom Flanagan is, from Illinois. He went to Notre Dame. He's a U.S. citizen. And so he was, literally the first hire of somebody from the Pentagon. So, the fact that the Liberals had a scandal in having to do with ads in Quebec. Well, let's also remember that Quebec is this is the one part of Canada where Canada could break up on this issue. There is a constituency within Quebec that wants to take Quebec out of Canada, and that would destroy Canada as we know it. So the fact that you have to do things to try to keep Quebec within Canada, I think that's how the AdScan debacle.
But Anthony, all of that. Tony, all of that stuff with Quebec goes back to 1931 with the Westminster, and I came across a document where it was like a coup d'état, and this is actually what happened. Like the Imperial Crown didn't walk away; they were forced out, according to the documents that I have, and this is when they created the Commonwealth. But, our Constitution, it doesn't matter who's there now, what Harper did or what he didn't do or what he's going to do, or Justin Trudeau, because right now we have 69 parliamentarians who are sitting on a committee for global governance, a parliamentarian committee for global governance. Justin Trudeau, Nicole Turmel, Carolyn Bennett, Elizabeth May, and the others, as well as David Suzuki and Maud Barlow. So why are these people not telling the Canadian citizens what's coming down? Why are they not telling them about globalization? I have a document with Stephen Harper and the Liberals together doing their meetings once a year in Montreal for the last 18 years, and they were calling it Adapting to a New World Order. So, these are all facts. And right now, we really, really, because of what they're doing and the propaganda with the media and everything else, we need to do something. And I think by voting for ourselves instead of politicians, we're going to go a long way. We may have some growing pains, but it's the only option we've got. Because right now they're bringing in globalization through the municipal level, because at the municipal level, we are not protected constitutionally. That's another thing that we need to fix. So, and this is all on the government website. And when you look at, their Weather Modification Act and this act and that act, it's just sickening.
Now, these 69 parliamentarians, this is the first I've really heard of it.
Yeah.
Their term.
I actually...
What's the 69, what's this committee of 69? Who's it? Who governs it? Who decided who's on it? Tell us about this committee of 69 if you know more about it. Right.
It's from the United Nations, and we have 69 parliamentarians. Like I said, I have a list. If you go to our group, Decolonize North America or End Political Party Elections, I have it in there. And, I have the whole list. And what I did is when I went to Ottawa in May, I confronted Carolyn Bennett. The thing is I should have brought my sheet with me, because when I came up to her and I asked her why she wasn't telling the people that she sits on the Parliamentary Committee for Global Governance. she went, "Who, me?" I said, "Yes." I said, "I'm sure I saw your name." And she flat out denied it, crossed her arms. And I said, "Well, there's Justin Trudeau. There's, I know that for sure." I said, "Well, maybe I'm wrong about you," because she really took me off guard and, like threw me for a loop there. But, and I had to rethink, like, why is she saying she's not? And I'm sure I saw her name, but at that moment, I couldn't be 100% sure. And as soon as I went online, there it was. She's fourth on the list. And she completely denied it and said that she was going to speak to Justin about it and blah, blah, blah. I have it all on video. But, this is a reality of what's coming down. And unless we close our doors...
69 parliamentarians.
Yes, 69 parliamentarians, and only parliamentarians...
Of Canada, there's a committee just for Canada, or is this a worldwide committee?
It's a worldwide, but in Canada we've got 69 that sit on that committee.
Mm-hmm.
So these are serious things that are coming down.
I'm sure Bruce and Mark would like to jump in.
I'm hearing you, but the reception really is not great for me tonight. But I'm hearing most of it, but it's hard for me to jump in sometimes. Go ahead, Tony. I mean, Tony, you've written about the New World Order a little bit. I think you touched on that in some of your books, I believe.
I think we lost Tony, so we'll have to wait for him to come back. Bruce, do you have anything that you wanted to?
Well, I find myself in pretty much a complete agreement. But the only thing I would remind people of is global order is coming whether you want it or not. It is the new hobby horse of the human race and has been for about 40 years. So if the capitalists don't get it, then there's gonna be a huge push for an Islamic caliphate. I mean, just look at what's going on in Europe. Globalization is inevitable now. It's just inevitable as far as I'm concerned. And, pulling away from that and fracturing, I don't think it's going to make anything better about this process that we're going through. Am I in favor of globalization as it's being run now by the financial world? No. It's unfortunate that these are the people who are leading the push for globalization, largely for their own self-interest. But the fact globalization as itself as a concept, people need to accept that this isn't going anywhere. It's not going anywhere.
Hold on, Bruce.
It's here to stay.
If I can interrupt, I think we're on the same page here. It's a nice sounding word, globalization, but it's actually corporate globalization, which is negatively impacting many of us. But I don't think it's inevitable because we have huge problems in Europe with austerity. The people are not happy, and in South America, people are bricks. We have different alliances forming, and I hope they succeed. But if we see it as inevitable, then I think we're really going to run into a lot of problems. Because I see it as basically corporate fascism. And I really think we have to push back against that.
Yeah, and I should clear something up just to make sure that everybody knows. I just want to add something, because when I say, when I'm talking about removing final decision-making authority out of all levels of governance and going for direct democracy, I'm not talking about overthrowing the government. The government can stay there, but they will become the civil servants they're supposed to be in the first place and come to the communities and get at least a 70% consensus. And we don't need to be in a rush for anything because we have to rush to make decisions. What was that, Mark?
Globalization. You want Mark to respond?
Okay, go ahead.
Pardon?
Did you hear Nicole, Mark?
I'm breaking right up. I'm having a real hard time here.
Okay.
Maybe I should hang up and call me again if possible. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, why don't we do that? Okay. Tony,
okay, I'll hang up. Thanks.
Okay, Tony, go ahead.
Can I jump in here? Yeah. Well, globalization is, we live on a globe, and, the word became prominent in the 1990s after the Soviet Union was no more. And it came to be associated with the idea that, capitalism can now finish off the job of becoming truly global, that the Soviet Union has been displaced and is no more. Yeah. Hi, Mark. And so it became synonymous with a corporate globalization. But there's other kinds of globalization that we can imagine. Who would say no to the opportunities of trade and reciprocity with our fellow human beings around the world? Maybe we could envisage a kind of ecological globalization. This term, the New World Order, I hear it again and again from Alex Jones. I find fairly chauvinistic. One of his mottos I keep hearing is the answer to 1984 is 1776. And so this idea that the New World Order is sort of reprehensible. Well, what's the old world order? The status quo since World War II has been pretty much that the USA decides everything for everybody. The USA has its military bases all over, has its soft culture, its it's Hollywood and rap and music, and it has its hard culture, its military, and so we do need to talk about forms of global governance in some areas. When we talk about our weather and our climate and our water, these things are not subject to national boundaries. We need to figure out, when we had freon in the atmosphere killing the ozone layer, we had to do something about that on a global level. So we do need, some forms of cooperation at the global level, even as we need, more autonomy and more self-governance and more responsiveness to our local conditions and situations in other areas of governance. So, there's a kind of cabal that we can identify with this corporate form of globalization, which says, a few hundred people who control all the wealth should make all the decisions, and that's the way it should be done. It obviously shouldn't be done that way, but there's all kinds of ways to imagine we've only got one planet. We're a global community. We have to find ways to express ourselves democratically at that global level and also at the local level, at the regional level.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Tony. But where I raise an objection is where the UN or about 250 people or 20 people are going to be deciding the fate of Canadians. And right now, from what I've been reading and researching through the UN website and everything else, and through the International Crimes Court, you name it, I've been trying to turn every stone I can and to get the real story here. But none of these people are thinking about the First Nations because in globalization. Pardon?
And so there's, Idle No More in Canada becomes the basis for this kind of global movement of Indigenous peoples. The history of colonization since 1492, which continues now at the level of this banking and this concentration of power in a banking military apparatus. This is the result of a long form of a long duration of colonization, and the people who've been sort of on the front lines of this colonization, the Indigenous peoples in the Americas, they're more representative of the vast majority of people throughout the world, or peoples throughout the world, who have experienced imperialism and colonization as a force coming at them, as a force violating their indigenous languages, protocols, laws, territorial configurations, and on and on. So the globalization of the movement of indigenous peoples globalization of the decolonization movement. And I think that's something that we can embrace in Canada. And Bruce says that, we have the most vocal, organized, stand-up Indigenous populations in the world in Canada. That represents the possibilities of another form of globalization. Because, of course, to exercise power, you have to make confederacies. You have to Tecumseh had to say, we're all Indians. We're all, Gandhi had to say we can't just be in our tribal, local organizations. We've got to expand our vision of our decolonization movement. Yes.
Yes. Are you aware of what's going on with the foreign workers? The 270 pipe fitters that were fired?
Tell me about it.
270 pipe fitters. I'm not sure if it was Saskatchewan or Alberta, but anyways, they were let go for 270 foreign workers. And then you've got the Royal Bank of Canada, who's letting go of many of their tellers, giving them, severance pays, and taking foreign workers in for $10 an hour. So when you're looking at what they're doing, okay, right now they said, they fixed the foreign worker program. Well, that's a crock, because what they did on the other hand is now they're calling something else as a working vacation. So they only took one thing out of there and pretended that they fixed it all. But it's a recolonization of the entire planet. And this is what they're doing. And when you start reading about this and you start seeing the bigger picture, it'll raise your hairs, because what's happening here is in Hamilton. Hamilton will be the hub. Exactly. But Hamilton right now is getting groomed to be the hub for all undocumented workers. So, there's some good things about globalization, but there's a lot of bad things.
What's the larger picture here? What's the largest picture? What's the larger picture here? How does this coalesce with what's happening down in the U.S. with all the Central American child immigrants landing now? Is this part of some kind of concerted intelligence operation that's going on?
Can I respond to that?
I would say yes. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, Bruce, could you? I'm sorry, I'm cutting out a lot. Could you ask your question again? Because I was recently in Honduras as a part of a Canadian delegation to observe elections, and I wrote a lot of articles on that, and it ties in directly with the refugee issue. Can you ask your question again? And I don't hear anything now, mind you. Are you there?
Well, okay, so yeah, I'm here. So we go with this idea of the foreign workers in Canada, which I find a little bit Republican. And then you look at this immigration thing that's going on in the U.S. now, where they mysteriously have thousands of children showing up at the Texas border now. Yeah. And they're coming from Central America, which means that they're migrating over, anywhere from 5 to 7 borders if they're coming from, Peru or whatever. And I'm just asking, is there anything larger we should be speaking about here? Does anybody have any specific insight into this?
Yes, we should. And this ties in exactly with what Tony has been talking about. Honduras, as an example. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can, Mark.
Very well. Okay, I can't hear you much. But anyway, Honduras, as an example, it's colonized. It's suffering from imperialism. The wealth is being extracted from that country. The indigenous people are being pushed off of their land, and they have no choice. They have nowhere to go. They had a legitimate election process. Manuel Zelaya, he was elected, and then there was an illegal coup. And this is the problem. It's ongoing imperialism, and the Canada-Honduras so-called free trade deal is just entrenching the imperialism because it benefits foreign investors, but not the people. That country is wrecked right now. It's crime-ridden. The oligarchs are doing fine, but they're pushing the indigenous people off of the land. They're depriving them of their human rights. It's just terrible. So this refugee problem in the States is a direct result of the imperialism. Imperialist countries, including Canada, are going down there and imposing their will, and then when there's a refugee problem, they sweep it under the rug.
Yeah. Okay.
One way to think about it, Bruce is getting me thinking here, is, of course, one of the problems with the way globalization has been structured is that capital is given sort of unlimited freedom of movement, and yet labor does not have freedom of movement. So this policy in Canada, it's interesting to reflect or consider the possibility that it's part of a larger global policy to structure, greater movement of labor, but have it done in a way that it benefits the corporate sector. It doesn't benefit the working class sector. So, our labor movements, we would have to be much more aggressive in thinking, how can we attach the protection of our workers in Canada to a global network where we see we want all the workers to cooperate together. Workers of the world unite, I suppose, would be the phrase. We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Right, but that would be
international labor
quite old in history. Yeah.
That would be easy. The problem with foreign workers is that they're being forced to work for a lower pay. That's not fair to them. And then that's not fair to the other people around either in their own countries who are being put out of work. So if there was a set, if they were paid at least the same wages that they normally get here, that they'd have to pay here, that to me would be fair. But right now what they're doing is they really see that displaced. Yeah. So right now, Canada is under contract with England to get at least. Okay, I'm going to finish that sentence.
So it
Canada
increases
and
mobility of labor, but it does so in a way that undermines workers' rights all over.
Exactly.
That's what we have to counter. And I think Bruce is, giving us a good incentive to wonder if the foreign workers program in Canada isn't part of a larger structure of changes, which, it seems to be that our governments now just deliver to us policies that are developed in other places at the global level, that our parliaments don't really do anything. That's not where the laws and the policies really come from. They come from secretive gatherings where a very small and elite group make all the decisions, and then these decisions are parceled out and given over to the Harper types who ran this through.
Right, because there is a bigger picture, because we've got about I think it's about 40 countries that are involved in this, and it's an employee exchange, I guess. And, the one with Canada and the UK is 5,530 people who Canada is trying to attract every year from the UK, and then send 5,000, the same amount, to the UK. And then each country will collect its own, the taxes for the other country. And this came out in 2010. So when you're looking at everything that they're doing, you're seeing that globalization, and you're seeing that control of the people. When they had this conference out in France, and when they were trying to, lure the people from France over to Canada, then the Canadian representative says, well, what happens to our workers? He says, well, they'll have to go elsewhere to work. So, I mean, I don't plan on having my 27-year-old son having to go to Iceland or anywhere else to go to work just because he can't find a job in his own country. And, if you listen to Obama's speech to the kids over at the military school, I don't remember the name, but, he told them they're going to have to compete against Asians and Chinese young men and women, and they're making $16,000 a year. So they're bringing in these people at $16,000 a year, when here they would normally be making about 55 to 60 minimum.
Of course, all this also has the effect of stimulating ethnic antagonisms and tensions within the population, which can be good for certain interests, divide and conquer interests, so the people don't get organized and identify the real source of the problem. This globalization. I mean, there's this the aspect that we seem to be dividing up the world again. That the war interests or some interests are trying to create this sort of thing called the West, which seems to be interpreted for us as a Judeo-Christian complex, with Islam being a kind of aberration, a kind of evil infiltration that we should fear within our own societies as well as globally. So we've got the West, and now, with Syria, with Iran, with Russia being demonized, it seems that there is a push to create divisions. That this ISIS, seems to be set up for. There's many predictions going around the internet that there's bombs missing, nuclear weapons missing, that there's going to be a nuke go off, sometime soon in an American city. It's going to be blamed on this group that is being set up, and that it's going to be the go ahead, give the green light for this global conflagration. That the terrifying thing about this cabal that's in control is that they depend on war, and the war making is the primary agency to create what the elites view as wealth. So how do we counteract this? How do we identify, say, the foreign workers program, and how hostile it is to the interests of Canadians, and fair pay and fair working conditions for Canadians, without blaming the Filipino people or the Mexican people who are the victims themselves? They're not responsible for this kind of travesty. How can we construct our education so we're not constantly drawn into this? Well, you're supposed to hate this kind of person or have distrust of this kind of person. One of the huge, cynical, terrible aspects of 9/11. It was constructed to poison our attitudes towards 1/6 of the world's population, Muslim and Arab populations particularly. If the world is going to survive this, we have to find a way to sort of globalize our mentality and embrace our fellow human beings and get out of this us versus them paradigm that keeps being pushed at us, in a very ugly fashion, for instance, by the media in the wake of the Moncton shooter episode, that is being pushed at us with this very fishy, suspicious ISIS situation. And if I followed you were speaking about a certain videotape or a certain YouTube that seemed to be, stage managed, constructed to create certain attitudes in our minds, to poison our minds, to set us up for these, hugely destructive actions. I mean, we talk about the need for environmentalism, environmental sanity. What can be more destructive of the environment and the militarism that is running free and unbridled right now?
Well, that's it. And that's why we have to do something, and we have to protect ourselves as Canadians, and, not have 250 people across the world deciding what we could do in our backyards. And that's exactly what's happening right now under sustainable development. And, if you look at the NDP, Mulcair, he was the sustainable development minister for Charest under the Liberals. And now, he's the head of the NDP, and he's all for Israel. His wife is French Israeli, and he also has a dual citizenship in France. So, I mean, there's nobody out there that, we can trust other than ourselves. And it's not about overthrowing the government or anything. When the government is prorogued, nothing falls apart. When they're gone 4 months out of the summer, nothing falls apart, and nothing needs to fall apart. And we can do it one step at a time. But at the same time, ensure that these people who need a place to live, who need security, can come to us, but at least make the same kind of salary that our own people would be making. So this way, they're not taking away jobs, and they're not having to work for menial pay. So there are solutions,
with no
and that's
benefit.
the whole premise of the. They have no benefits. Well, they should have benefits.
Modern day slavery.
Just like everybody else.
Modern day slavery, and they have no rights, and they'll be sent back.
Exactly.
It's modern day slavery. That's what it is.
Yeah. But the only people who can fix this is us, the Canadian citizens, and the nations together.
Yeah, I was just going to throw out there that
Go ahead.
The modern day slavery, yes, and the Canadians who are, desperately trying to survive and, hold some kind of standard of living, that are losing their jobs, and seeing these people come in, creating that very divide that you spoke about earlier, Tony. And which creates the
and that
tensions.
Works to the corporations.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem, the corporate strategy.
North America was very successful after World War II in inducting a certain amount of the working population into the middle class. Labor unions were able to elevate and represent workers. So we had the growth of a middle class. Now this new system seems to thrive on creating larger and larger disparities. Remove the people in the middle and create this polarization. And it's an amazingly concentrated body of wealth where 400 people end up owning like half of everything on the planet to own. We need to be thinking much more about the creation of public spaces, of our public interest. Institutions like our hospitals, our public healthcare system, our public broadcasting system, which has been sort of taken over, and it seems to have become a propaganda system for a certain agenda. Our public education system, our parks, our national parks. We keep having this agenda of privatization pushed at us. No, we in Canada have quite a history of public interest broadcasting, public interest lobbying, civil servants who protect and are dedicated to protect the public interest. All of that is being eviscerated. And go ahead, Mark.
Okay.
I agree totally.
Mark, 1 second. We have about 5 minutes left, so we'll just go around and give everybody an opportunity to have a final say. Mark, we'll start with you.
Okay. You're cutting out though, but can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, always.
Okay,
always.
Well, you guys are cutting out. I agree with Tony's assessment there is right on. I mean, we're losing public space and it's like the private sector is extorting money from us. We're paying too much for P3 hospitals. We're paying too much for medications. We should have a national pharmacare program. We're losing the country is supposed to serve the people, and it is only serving a small cabal of elite, and our whole country is suffering because of that. And civil servants, I mean, if you want autocratic control or dictatorship, you get rid of the civil servants, you get rid of the public domain, you get rid of the public broadcaster, turn it into state broadcaster, you take the power from the public, and that is what is happening. And the new model is a new what Tony refers to in his books as the fourth world.
Yeah. Okay, Bruce, final word.
Yeah, I think that we all agree about what's going on. It's just what to do about it. I think that's up in the air. I appreciate the caller who said that, we have to vote for ourselves, but like, how do you do that? The modern economy is one of such unbelievable interdependence that separating yourself from it is extremely difficult. And making changes to it because of the economy of scale and the supply chain is extremely difficult. And I can't help but wonder aloud if this interdependence was part of the agenda, because it's very difficult to redact a position from the modern society. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right, Bruce. To add to what you just said, if you go to i-accuse with 1c.com, you'll see that we even have a sample constitution there, ready for people to take apart or add to or do whatever they want. But at least it's a sample constitution that we could probably all live with. And what we've done is we've created what we call the two-row living constitution that would be a 50-50 governance with the nation, and one can't make a move without the other. We'd all need consensus in our communities, just like with their clans, and it'll show you what the political system does, why it fails. So if you want to go to our IAQ's website, I think that you might be able to get some answers there. But just keep in mind, it's just it's a work in progress. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of the radio show, is to get this conversation going and get people's perspectives and what are the things that are going to create challenges or be challenges and that sort of thing. And that's why we really appreciate the three of you joining us. Tony, last word.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Gail and Nicole, for hosting this discussion. It's really heartening and encouraging to be able to consider our conditions and situation here in Canada and to speak freely. I accuse, we still haven't got into the issue, which I think is deep within your history and philosophy, that Indigenous peoples and the relationship with Indigenous peoples. So that's the first relationship, that's the original relationship, and we could make a great deal of that. We could develop our country, for instance, through the making of national treaties with Indigenous peoples. We have that capacity in our Constitution, and I think IAQs is bringing forward some very creative thinking on statesmanship and new ways to envisage our country, ways that are once very old, and bring us to the deeper origins of the country, and a very future-oriented and progressive, and could be establishing a beacon of enlightenment in Canada for the rest of the world.
Okay, thanks. And
was I typing in front of everybody?
I recognize that pounding anywhere. Nicole, did you want to just explain what I-accuse is an acronym for?
Yeah, I-accuse is an acronym for Indigenous and Civil Unified Sovereign Enactment. And with the creation of the two-row living constitution, where, I think everybody would be pleased, and it would raise the voice of 1.2 million Indigenous peoples who are the original and still the original owners of these lands, equal to 33 million. And, we can share in the resources. We can, come up with new ideas. We don't need to use oil and gas. There's other alternatives. I think that if we had final decision-making authority, we could go a very, very long way. And that's about it.
Okay, great. Let me just take a few minutes to thank you all once again. And we'd love to have you back again sometime. We'll organize, talking more about the Indigenous people, getting into, current events, whatever happens to come up over the next few months. And if you gentlemen have any topics that you'd like to discuss, we're more than open to, we just need to have the conversation. Nicole and I have been provided with an opportunity to have a radio show, and we want to start the conversation, and we want to invite people who are interested in solutions. And let's talk about it.
Yes, and Mark, Bruce, Anthony, thank you so much. It's been a true honor to have you here and a great blessing. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll see everybody next week.
Bruce.
Thanks again.
Mark.
Everybody.
Bye,
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Okay, cheerio. Okay.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
There is no good and evil. There is only power, and those too weak to seek it.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Be sure to tune in weekdays 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time for Strange Universe with Sean David Morton. A strange, interesting, and engaging wide variety of topics. So be here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
I would like, if I may, to take you on a stray